We are back here on Fantasy Football Today with Jamey's draft takeaways. You just heard Dave talk about wanting one of the top 9 wide receivers, wanting fair value and not reaching at quarterback, being a little bit more comfortable waiting on running back this year, and if you reach at tight end, you lose unless it's Tyler Warren. Jamey, your first draft takeaway is that you want, and you actually mentioned this, but you said you'd get more into it here, 2 running backs through round 5.
I think just based on the quality of the players at that position, there's a pretty steep drop-off once you get to around that Pacheco, Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift range. Like, you can have whatever feelings you have about Travis Etienne or Javonte Williams or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren, whatever Steelers for running back is your favorite. There's just a lot of questions. And if I can alleviate the questions at that position and get guys that I know are going to be guaranteed touches, maybe work in the passing game, hopefully work at the goal line, do all 3 things that we love from the running back position, I know that wide receiver group in rounds 5, 6, and 7 is so robust and getting bigger by the day with how, again, we're seeing some of the injuries play out and some of the position sort of shake itself out. Like, I'm typically a hero RB guy. I've been that way for the last about 4 or 5 years. But I think even just dipping your toe back into the running back pool, whether it's the way you defined it with those, again, I'll say top 10 receivers because London's not going to make it back there. If you don't want to get T. Higgins or Ladd McConkey or Tyreek Hill,
or if I want to wait for one of those guys in round 3.
Yes, certainly they'll be there in round 3. But what I'm getting at is, like, to go Jahmyr Gibbs and Bucky Irving or Chase Brown, whoever's there in round 2, and then you come back in round 3 and then you want to take one of those receivers, or you sort of play it a different way and you say, I'm going to take the receiver there if it's a McConkey or a JSN, one of those guys, and then go back and get an Amari Hampton or James Cook and those running backs that we're starting to see sort of shape round 3 at this point, where I think Trevion Henderson's ADP will settle once we get a lot of real drafts happening. Maybe Ken Walker's still there, Breece Hall for whatever reason still there. But once you get like that round 4, 5, 6, still good running backs, but a lot of great wide receivers still, where it's not reaching for those guys, but Marvin Harrison and Cortland Sutton and DK Metcalf and George Pickens, like, I could name literally 20 guys that I like there. And so ideally you want to get a top 10 wide receiver, but you can get 3 of wide receiver 15 through 30, and I think it's very, very good quality. And again, 2 receivers versus 3 receivers, you might lean a little bit more toward the receivers, but you can still get a Jahmyr Gibbs and Isaiah Pacheco in round 5, and I like that if those 3 receivers are still really good. So I want to come away with 2 running backs in my first 5 picks.
Think about the quarterbacks that are going to be available in round 6 and 7. Think about the tight ends that are going to be available in round 6 and 7. It's not great. And so if that's really the rounds that you want to target some of these great receivers, and you're right, it really is exploding, it makes perfect sense to kind of build around that. But I have a question. Let's say I start my draft. Let's say I get Jamar Chase, Brock Bowers, and then name Mike Evans with my first 3 picks. Are you okay if 2 of those 5 running backs are in rounds 4 and 5 instead of one of them being toward the top of it?
So I know for me, I would be targeting R.J. Harvey in that spot because he typically falls there. I have him as a early round 4 pick. He's typically going late round 5. So I know I can probably get R.J. Harvey there. I think Pacheco's there. I think DeAndre Swift is there. So I know I'm going to get guys that I still like, don't love, but I like. So yes, I am okay with that, knowing that I got arguably the best wide receiver, arguably the best tight end, one of the top 12-ish caliber receivers with how this Tampa Bay receiving core is shaking out. And if we're talking 2-receiver league versus 3-receiver league, then I can go Harvey, Pacheco, Swift, or Harvey, Swift, Pollard, or Harvey, Swallard, Pacheco, and I'm great because I have 3 guys that I think are very safe with plenty of upside still.
I heard a Swallard in there. I think you could combine Swift and Pollard.
Swallard?
Can we get both of their fantasy points?
I swallowed a fly. Oh my. Oh me, oh my.
There was a fantasy analyst who swallowed a fly. So, all right, that's your first takeaway here. You said in a 2-receiver league with 1 flex, okay, which is a very common format. 2-receiver league, 1 flex. You will reach for a top 3 tight end. What exactly is reaching in that scenario?
So Dave was talking. I didn't answer on purpose because I know I was going to bring this up. So you said taking one of the top tight ends in round 2. I have Bowers and McBride ranked toward the back end of round 2.
Yep.
But in a 2-receiver league, I will reach for one of those 2 guys in the middle of round 2 because you only have to find one of these 2 wide receivers. So once it gets past, for me, Drake London, similar to what I was talking about the running backs. Love Jacobs, love Irving, love Chase Brown, love all these guys. But I think if you can get a positional advantage in any way, shape, or form, especially in a 2-receiver league where there's only 1 flex option, so you're starting, 2, 4, 6 spots, those guys are such, again, at such a different level right now, Bowers, McBride, and Kittle. So I would take Bowers middle round 2. I would take McBride middle to the end of round 2. And I would take Kittle in the middle of round 3. I have them ranked that way. I have Kittle ranked that way anyway, no matter the format. But I think reaching for one of those guys a little bit earlier, where you're not having to build out your wide receiver depth from a starting perspective, helps you out a little bit more. So I'm not afraid in those formats to take a little bit of an early swing on Bowers, McBride, or Kittle.
I want to try and think of a scenario to test you on that. But I really think it does come down to just if you want to have that type of positional advantage, you'll get it. What I worry about is if I take one of those tight ends and they don't produce to the level of a running back or a wide receiver that goes in that range. Let's say I'm debating Drake London versus Brock Bowers. Okay, Drake London last year averaged around 16.5 fantasy points per game in PPR. Bowers didn't come near there. Am I missing out if I get a receiver at that point that averages 16.5, 17 PPR points per game versus a tight end that's only going to give me 15.5, maybe 16 PPR points?
Well, I mean, you have to have the belief that they're going to do that, each player. And if it's just a 1 point difference, because Bowers is at 15 plus and London was at 16 plus.
Sure.
I'm not going to be so upset. It's if you get the Tyreek Hill situation. If you draft a player that early, expecting 20 points per game and he delivers 13,
12, right.
Then you're clearly, ruining your fantasy team. The point about the tight end is you have to expect them to be 15 to 18 points to justify it. Like if Bowers takes a significant dip and he's in that 10, 11 point range, you killed your roster, most likely. So you have to have the confidence that Bowers is going to be as good or better, McBride as good or better, Kittle as good or better, because otherwise you might get that with Tyler Warren, you might get that with Tucker Kraft, you might get with any other of those players. So again, I put it top 10 receiver, then the tight ends. So I think in the first 16 picks, the top 10 wide receivers are gone. The one that might slip, which I'm seeing in a lot of my drafts, is A.J. Brown because of his hamstring injury.
Right.
So he's, and his average draft position suggests that. On our site, he's now a round 3 pick. So he's falling. We saw it in the draft today. If you don't love Brown versus those tight ends, you may have a choice to make. So I think just format matters here, or roster starting lineup matters for me to where I'm going to take those tight ends a little bit sooner. And in a 10-team league,
I was about to
absolutely taking those guys in round 2.
Right.
So no question about it, trying to get Bowers, McBride.
Even more aggressively
Kittle,
so.
100%. Like I said, same thing with the quarterbacks. In a 10-team league, the onesie positions, Adams was going to wear his Odell Beckham onesie week 1 of the Giants season opener. Quarterback or tight end, you want to separate yourself, and quarterback and tight end's the way to do it.
All right, your last draft takeaway is that you have identified 3 running backs. You want one of them, Jordan Mason, Zach Charbonnet, Braylon Allen, and one of these 3 receivers, George Pickens, Ricky Pearsall, and Emeka Ibuka in every league. That's really interesting. You want one of Jordan Mason, Zach Charbonnet, Braylon Allen, and one of Pickens, Pearsall, Ibuka in every league.
I feel good when I get players that I think are going to be breakout candidates, and I try to, give a little bit of a not pigeonholing myself to one player, because I don't want to just, if I miss that guy, I ruin my team or ruin my feelings about that team. So I love those 3 running backs and the setups that they're in. Mason could share and potentially take over at some point because of injury in Minnesota. Charbonnet is, getting closer, from what at least one report, to making it a 50-50 split in Seattle, and we saw what he's like whenever there's no Ken Walker there. And in the case of Braylon Allen, I think that's going to happen at some point during the season with all the rave reviews he's getting. And again, a Breece Hall injury could lead to him being a superstar. For the receivers, Pickens, great spot, great value. Emeka Ibuka, you're going to have to really play the board, because we're not getting a good indication of where his average draft position is comparatively to where he will start to go in drafts. And the same thing with Ricky Pearsall because of the injuries in their respective receiving cores. So you might have to be a little bit aggressive. The draft that you referenced that we did today, I had to be a little bit aggressive in taking Emeka Ibuka. I missed out on the 3 running backs, so I don't love that. But that's what happens when you're drafting with people who know you. Like, I know Dave was going to take one of Ibuka or Pearsall, or maybe both. I was picking right in front of him, so made a decision to do that a little bit early. Dan Schneier, who, referencing the email that you read on the mailbag, I hate Dan, took Braylon Allen like 2 spots in front of me.
What round was that in?
It's early. Like, he's the one, of all these guys, he's the one that goes the earliest of the 6 players, just because he's still living in the double-digit rounds. And I get it. But I put him in the same range. Like, when my rankings, it's Mason, it's Charbonnet, it's Braylon Allen, and they're 28, 29, 30 right now. So I'm extremely aggressive with Braylon Allen. He's usually the one that I always get. And then it's a matter of, can I get 2 of these guys or one other player to pair with him? I'm hunting my breakout candidates. And if I can get 1, 2, 6, not realistic, but I'm very happy with how my rosters are. So the point would be, target players that you like that aren't obvious ones, that aren't the top 3-4 round type of guys. You know, these may sound obvious because of where they're headed. I get that, but they're not in terms of where their draft capital is. But try and find guys that you want to, like you want Tyler Warren. You're taking him in round 8 because you want to get him on your team. I want to get 1 or 2 of these guys on my team, and the point would be is designate those players for yourself and try and be aggressive in drafting.
I really want to co-sign the 3 wide receivers that you picked. I think they're all great. And just a quick tip, Adam, when you're looking at wide receivers in that round, let's call it 5 through 8 range, the first question you should ask yourself is, can this guy average 7 targets per game? Because that's the baseline for a good receiver to finish as a top 24 option in fantasy. I think all 3 of these guys, it might be the floor, 7 targets per game. Some of these guys might be able to get to 8 targets per game. They're all very good.
All right, well, I've got some takeaways to give you as well, so we'll take a break and come back, and I'll tell you what I've learned from the recent drafts that we've done after this break on Fantasy Football Today.